Have you ever wondered how a man spent 27 years in prison and still came out preaching peace and forgiveness? What kind of strength does it take to fight against injustice without becoming bitter? Today, we will take you on a journey through the incredible life of Nelson Mandela. This video is not just a story, but also a way for you to improve your English. So, sit back, enjoy, and learn English through stories. The year was 1918. The world was still recovering from the First World War, and in a small village in South Africa called Mvizo, a boy was born. His name was Relila Mandela. In his language, Xhosa, Relila meant pulling the branch of a tree, or as many interpreted it, troublemaker. No one knew that this little troublemaker would grow up to change the history of his country. Mandela belonged to the Thembu royal family. His father was a chief, but when Mandela was just a boy, his father lost his title after a dispute with a local magistrate, a judge. Despite this, Mandela's childhood was peaceful. He played with other boys, herded, took care of cattle, and listened to the elders tell stories about African heroes who fought for their land. These stories planted the first seeds of resistance in his heart. His mother, a deeply spiritual woman, played a significant role in shaping his values. She taught him kindness and the importance of respecting all people, regardless of their background. But Mandela's life changed when he was sent to a school run by missionaries, religious teachers. Here, his teacher gave him an English name, Nelson. This was common in South Africa at the time, as colonial rulers preferred native people to have European names. Mandela didn't question it at that time, but it was one of the first steps in a long journey of cultural change he would later fight against. As he grew older, Mandela was sent to study at the prestigious, highly respected Fordham University. This was one of the few places where Black South Africans could get higher education. But trouble followed him. At university, he got involved in student politics and was expelled for protesting against the unfair rules of the institution. His spirit of rebellion was beginning to take shape. He had seen enough injustice and knew he could not remain silent any longer. To avoid an arranged marriage set up by his guardian, Mandela ran away to Johannesburg. The big city was full of surprises. For the first time, he saw the deep racial discrimination, unfair treatment based on race. In South Africa, Black people lived in poverty, while white people controlled the government and economy. It was here that he met Walter Sisulu, a man who would change his life. Sisulu introduced him to politics and the African National Congress, ANC, a group fighting for the rights of Black South Africans. Mandela became a lawyer and opened South Africa's first Black law firm with his friend Oliver Tambo. They defended Black clients who were victims of unfair laws. By now, Mandela was deeply involved in the anti-apartheid movement. Apartheid was a system of racial separation, in South Africa where Black people had no rights. They couldn't vote, live in certain areas, or even use the same buses as white people. Mandela knew this had to change. He became one of the leaders of the ANC's Defiance campaign, where Black South Africans refused to obey racist laws. They entered whites-only areas, refused to carry passbooks, identity papers Black people were forced to have, and stood up against the government peacefully. But the government did not like this. They arrested Mandela several times, but nothing could stop him. In 1960, something happened that changed everything. The Sharperville Massacre. Police opened fire on peaceful Black protesters, killing 69 people. This event shook Mandela. He realized peaceful protests were not enough. The government was too powerful and too brutal. The ANC, which had always followed nonviolent protests, decided to form a military wing, and Mandela became its leader. They planned sabotage, intentional damage against government buildings, but never harmed people. Still, the government declared them terrorists. Mandela went into hiding. He traveled secretly, even going abroad to gather support. But in 1962, he was caught and sentenced to 5 years in prison. A year later, the police found documents linking him to the ANC's military activities. This time, they gave him a life sentence. He was sent to Robben Island, a prison in the middle of the sea. It was a place meant to break men. The cells were tiny, the labor was hard, and the guards were cruel. Mandela was forced to break rocks every day under the hot sun. But prison did not break Mandela. He became a symbol of resistance. He educated himself, read books, and even learned Afrikaans, the language of his oppressors, because he believed in understanding one's enemy. He built friendships with fellow prisoners, and even some guards secretly admired him for his dignity, self-respect. He also took up gardening in prison, using it as a way to cultivate patience and maintain his mental strength. He wrote letters to his family, expressing his love and hope for a free South Africa. Years passed. The outside world started paying attention. Countries imposed sanctions, punishments like cutting off trade, on South Africa. People across the world protested for his release. The government tried to make deals with him, offering freedom if he agreed to stop fighting apartheid. But Mandela refused. He said, "I cannot sell my people's right to freedom." Then, something incredible happened. After 27 years, in 1990, Mandela walked free. Thousands of people gathered to see him, chanting his name. He was 71 years old, but his spirit was as strong as ever. He did not seek revenge. Instead, he worked to bring Black and white South Africans together. He spoke about peace, forgiveness, and unity. In 1994, South Africa held its first election where Black people could vote. Nelson Mandela became the first Black president of the country. His journey, from a village boy to a prisoner to a president, was unlike any other. But even as a leader, he stayed humble. He donated a part of his salary to children's education and refused to stay in office for more than one term. He often reminded people that leadership was about service, not power. Mandela's life was filled with pain, sacrifice, and struggle, but he never lost his kindness. He once invited his former prison guard to his presidential inauguration ceremony when someone becomes president. He showed the world that forgiveness is stronger than hate. He stepped down from politics in 1999, but continued to work for peace and charity. He fought against HIV/AIDS, campaigned for education, and supported humanitarian efforts worldwide. He lived a long life and passed away in 2013 at the age of 95. But his legacy, what he left behind, remains. Schools, streets, and even a day, Nelson Mandela Day, are named after him, reminding us of his fight for justice. Mandela once said, "Always seems impossible until it's done." His life teaches us that no matter how hard the road is, if we stand for what is right, we can change the world. After Nelson Mandela's release in 1990, the road to freedom for South Africa was still long and difficult. Although apartheid had begun to collapse, tensions between different racial and political groups were at an all-time high. Many feared that the country would break out into a civil war. But Mandela, after spending 27 years in prison, had not lost his vision of a united and peaceful nation. He knew that true freedom was not just about political change, but also about healing the wounds of the past and building a better future for all South Africans. Mandela's first major challenge was negotiating with the South African government. He had to work with President F.W. de Klerk, the very man who had kept apartheid in place for years. At first, their relationship was tense. De Klerk, though willing to make changes, still hesitated to give full power to the Black majority. Meanwhile, violence was erupting across the country. Some extremist groups, both Black and white, refused to accept peaceful negotiations. Mandela had to act quickly to prevent chaos. He traveled across the country, meeting leaders of different factions, calming fears, and urging everyone to choose peace over revenge. He understood that without stability, South Africa could never rebuild itself, and so he worked tirelessly to create dialogue among opposing sides. In 1993, something extraordinary happened. Nelson Mandela and F.W. de Klerk were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize together for their efforts in ending apartheid. This was a powerful message to the world that peace was possible. But for Mandela, the fight was not over yet. The next step was holding South Africa's first democratic elections, where people of all races could vote for the first time in history. The election took place in April 1994. Millions of Black South Africans stood in long lines, some waiting for hours just to cast their votes. It was an emotional moment. Many elderly citizens were voting for the first time in their lives. Some cried, others sang, and the atmosphere was filled with hope. And when the results were announced, the world watched as Nelson Mandela became the first Black president of South Africa. The celebration was immense, but Mandela knew that the real work was just beginning. His victory speech was one of unity, in which he stated that never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another. As president, Mandela faced the challenge of healing a deeply divided nation. He introduced policies of reconciliation, the process of bringing people together after conflict. Instead of seeking revenge against the white minority, he urged forgiveness. One of his most famous actions was inviting his former prison guards to his inauguration ceremony. It was a powerful message. South Africa needed unity, not more hatred. He also created the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which allowed victims and perpetrators of apartheid-era crimes to come forward, tell their stories, and seek forgiveness. This process was painful, but it helped the country move forward without endless cycles of revenge. Many of the stories that emerged were heartbreaking, yet Mandela believed that truth was necessary for true healing. One of Mandela's biggest challenges was rebuilding the economy. Years of sanctions had left South Africa struggling financially. Mandela encouraged foreign investment and worked on improving education and health care for Black South Africans. However, he also had to manage the expectations of those who had suffered under apartheid. Many expected quick changes, but rebuilding a country takes time. Unemployment and poverty were still major issues, and Mandela knew that true freedom meant improving the lives of ordinary people. To address these economic and social struggles, Mandela introduced initiatives to provide housing, clean water, and electricity to millions who had never had access before. His government also expanded healthcare services, particularly in rural areas, where medical facilities were scarce. Though these improvements took time, they were significant steps towards creating a more equal society. Perhaps one of the most inspiring moments of Mandela's presidency came in 1995 during the Rugby World Cup. Rugby had always been seen as a sport of white South Africans, and Black citizens had little interest in it. But Mandela saw an opportunity to unite the country. He supported the national rugby team, the Springboks, and even wore their green and gold jersey, a powerful symbol of reconciliation. When South Africa won the championship, the entire country, Black and white, celebrated together. It was a defining moment in the nation's history. This event was later turned into the famous movie Invictus. The victory symbolized something greater than sports. It showed that South Africans could come together as one. Mandela chose to serve only one term as president, stepping down in 1999. This was rare in Africa, where many leaders try to hold on to power. He wanted to set an example that leadership was about service, not personal gain. He spent his retirement working for peace, children's rights, and fighting against HIV/AIDS, which was a major crisis in South Africa at the time. He also traveled the world, meeting world leaders and spreading messages of peace and human rights. His influence extended beyond politics. He became a moral compass for the world, advocating for social justice in every form. Even in his final years, Mandela remained a guiding force for South Africa and the world. He passed away in 2013 at the age of 95, but his legacy continues to inspire millions. Schools, streets, and awards have been named after him, and his birthday, July 18th, is celebrated worldwide as Nelson Mandela Day, encouraging people to do acts of kindness and service. His life is proof that one person, no matter how difficult their journey, can change history. The words he lived by, "I never lose, I either win or learn," continue to encourage those facing their own struggles. Nelson Mandela's story is not just about South Africa. It's a lesson for the world. It teaches us about resilience, forgiveness, and the power of standing up for what is right. No matter how tough the battle, change is possible if we never give up. His famous words, "It always seems impossible until it's done," remind us that with determination and courage, we can achieve great things. Mandela was not just a leader. He was a symbol of hope. He showed that even the harshest struggles can lead to victory if one remains steadfast. His life proves that humanity's greatest strength lies in its ability to forgive, to rebuild, and to choose peace over war. This concludes the story of Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela's life was full of extraordinary moments, but beyond the well-known facts, there are many lesser-known details that make his story even more fascinating. These details reveal the depth of his character, the sacrifices he made, and the small moments that shaped the man who would become a global icon. Mandela's journey did not begin with politics, but with a childhood deeply rooted in African traditions. Born in 1918 in the small village of Mvizo, Mandela was given the name Ralila, which in Xhosa means troublemaker. This name, perhaps unknowingly, foreshadowed his role in challenging injustice. His early life was shaped by the values of his Thembu royal lineage, and from a young age, he was exposed to leadership and governance. He listened to elders settle disputes, watched his guardian lead, and unknowingly absorbed the principles of justice and fairness that would later define his life. One of the defining moments of his youth was when he ran away from an arranged marriage. As a young man, Mandela was expected to follow tradition, but he had different aspirations. He fled to Johannesburg, where he experienced firsthand the harsh realities of racial discrimination. It was there that he encountered the African National Congress, ANC, and became involved in the anti-apartheid movement. His decision to leave behind the safety of tradition marked the beginning of a life dedicated to fighting for justice. Had he stayed, his life might have been entirely different, but his thirst for education and equality propelled him into a world much larger than the one he knew. While Mandela's activism is well documented, what many do not know is that he was also a master strategist. Unlike other revolutionaries who sought immediate confrontation, Mandela believed in preparation and patience. Before forming the ANC's military wing, Umkhonto we Sizwe, MK, he secretly traveled across Africa and even to London, studying guerrilla warfare and seeking support for the anti-apartheid movement. His time in Ethiopia was particularly significant as he received military training and met other African leaders who were also fighting for independence. This global perspective influenced his approach to resistance, making him not just a South African leader, but a Pan-Africanist. Another lesser-known fact about Mandela's imprisonment on Robben Island is the way he turned the prison into a university. Despite the harsh conditions, he encouraged fellow prisoners to educate themselves, leading secret discussions and teaching political philosophy. The prisoners referred to their experience as Mandela University because of the knowledge they gained. He also learned Afrikaans, the language of the oppressors, to better understand his enemies and negotiate effectively. This ability to adapt and find purpose, even in captivity, speaks to his incredible resilience. He even smuggled out letters and essays, ensuring that the anti-apartheid movement continued beyond the prison walls. The guards who once treated him with hostility eventually respected his wisdom, and some even secretly admired his strength. Mandela's release in 1990 was an event broadcast worldwide, but the negotiations leading up to it were long and complex. Few people realized that Mandela had actually begun secret talks with the government while still in prison. Over several years, he engaged in private discussions with government officials, understanding that peace could only come through dialogue. This ability to negotiate without bitterness was a testament to his wisdom and long-term vision for South Africa. He understood that even though he had spent 27 years in prison, anger and revenge would not build a nation. Instead, he chose to focus on unity, despite opposition from both sides. After his release, Mandela's greatest challenge was preventing civil war. The years between 1990 and 1994 were among the most violent in South African history. Political assassinations, clashes between different factions, and resistance from extremist groups nearly pushed the country into chaos. Mandela, however, remained calm and focused. He personally met with leaders of rival groups, persuading them to choose peace over revenge. His leadership during this period is often overshadowed by his presidency, but without it, South Africa might not have transitioned peacefully to democracy. His personal charm and diplomacy played a key role in disarming even his fiercest opponents. During his presidency, Mandela made a conscious effort to break racial barriers in unexpected ways. One of the most symbolic acts was his friendship with Betsy Verwoerd, the widow of Hendrik Verwoerd, the architect of apartheid. By visiting her home and engaging in conversations, Mandela demonstrated that reconciliation was not just political but personal. His ability to forgive and build bridges, even with those who once upheld apartheid, set an example for the entire nation. He also made bold decisions, such as wearing the Springbok rugby jersey during the 1995 Rugby World Cup, a powerful symbol of unity that resonated deeply with white South Africans. Mandela's influence extended far beyond South Africa. He played a significant role in promoting peace in conflict zones around the world. One of his most notable efforts was in Burundi, where he mediated peace talks to end a brutal civil war. His reputation as a peacemaker made him a respected figure on the global stage. And even after stepping down from the presidency, world leaders continued to seek his advice on international conflicts. His wisdom was not just in words, but in his actions. He was willing to mediate even the most complex disputes, proving that leadership is about service, not power. One of the most surprising aspects of Mandela's later life was his transformation into a pop culture icon. From appearing in movies and music videos to meeting celebrities like Michael Jackson and Beyoncé, Mandela became a beloved figure across generations. He even had a strong friendship with Queen Elizabeth II, who treated him with warmth and informality, calling him by his first name, something she rarely did. He understood the power of culture in shaping perceptions and embraced his role as a global symbol of resilience and hope. Despite his global fame, Mandela remained humble and deeply connected to his roots. He chose to spend much of his later years in his childhood village of Kunu, where he enjoyed simple pleasures like tending to his garden and playing with his grandchildren. He often spoke about the importance of family and regretted the time he lost with his children due to his political struggle. Even after years of struggle, he remained a man of the people, living modestly and valuing the simple joys of life. Mandela's impact on education is another lesser-discussed aspect of his legacy. He firmly believed that education was the most powerful tool for change. His foundation, the Nelson Mandela Foundation, continues to support educational initiatives, particularly for disadvantaged children. Mandela also personally supported many young people in their studies, often funding scholarships out of his own pocket. He knew that real freedom came not just from political liberation, but from intellectual empowerment. One of his most emotional speeches came on his 90th birthday, when he addressed the world with a simple but powerful message. It is in your hands now. By this, he meant that the fight for justice, equality, and peace is not the responsibility of one person, but of every individual. His words serve as a reminder that each of us has the power to make a difference. The fight for a better world did not end with Mandela. It continues in the hands of those willing to stand up for justice. Mandela's death in 2013 marked the end of an era, but his legacy continues to inspire millions. His life is proof that resilience, forgiveness, and hope can overcome even the darkest of times. He showed the world that true leadership is not about power, but about service to others. His story is one of struggle, endurance, and ultimate triumph. He was not just a politician or a revolutionary. He was a symbol of what humanity can achieve when guided by principles of justice and compassion. Nelson Mandela's journey teaches us that change is possible, no matter how impossible it seems. So, as we remember Mandela, let us not only celebrate his achievements, but also carry forward his message. Let us stand up for what is right, forgive when it is hard, and always believe in the power of unity. His legacy is in our hands now,